Hello, everyone. Welcome to BB Dev Days Day 2. I am your host for at least the beginning of this session. My name is Heather McLean, and I'm very pleased to introduce the team from DNL Omnimedia. We have Carl Deasing and Nate Klein here. Also, Jen Philbrook in the chat. Here to support the session of custom APIs and integrations. I also just want to take a moment to thank DNL Omnimedia for being an ongoing sponsor of BB Dev Days. We couldn't do it without you. I'm excited for the session. I'm going to get off the stage and let you rock and roll.
All right, thank you so much, Heather, and glad everyone can join us here. Good group today. We've got a little over 130 people here, so we are going to use the chat. So this will be an interactive session. We'll stop and answer things, as they pop up if they're of interest. So feel free to use the chat, ask any questions you have. They'll get called out to us. Heather's always very good. I've done a lot of these presentations with her over the years, and she's been able to call out questions as well. So you won't impede our flow, but basically just a little bit about us. We're DNL Omnimedia, so we've been a Blackbaud partner since 2006. We're going on our 17th year, partnering with Blackbaud on all kinds of great implementations and integration projects. And what we're going to show a little bit more about today is really some of the open APIs and the integrations you can build and data warehousing and things like that. So we look forward to your questions there. On the next slide here, I've got just a little bit about the presenting team. We're going to be mostly live and talking over some live stuff, but just a few pieces of slide info here. I got myself as a co-founder here, started the agency 17 years ago. I've been working with Blackbaud ever since. I've got Nate Klein on the call with me today. He's going to be driving some of our examples, our data warehouse and the integrations we build, talking through some of the scenarios, and just really talking about API integrations. If you want to say hi, Nate.
Hi, everybody. Excited to be here.
Nate's very excited to be here, and he's not camera shy. I was on camera with him earlier, but we set up this dev environment for the presentation today, and we set it up on a Mac Mini, so he's cameraless at the moment, but we'll think about that for next year, part of our improvements that will make it. We've got Jen as well. She's in the chat, so she can call out things as well in case I don't see your question pop up, but feel free to ask questions as we go. We'll click through the next slide, just kind of an example of the clients that we work with, really across all verticals in the nonprofit space. So we're building integrations for healthcare foundations, higher ed, cause and cure type organizations, environmental organizations. So really just across the board. And some of our services on the next slide here on slide 4. Just kind of span this area, and what we're talking about are what are the integrations, what are we doing with the API in each one of these areas. So we hope to show a few different examples there, as well as one of our most popular integrations, which is the data warehouse. And we set up an environment against our own sandbox environments of the Blackbaud products to demo today, so that we can look at data, and it's all fake data. We can make new fake data, watch it sync over, and really talk through the integrations in greater detail. And lastly on the slide, this is kind of just an overview of what we're going to be discussing today. So we'll start off with a discussion of Luminate Online web services and the sync capabilities. So if you have Luminate Online as one of your Blackbaud products in your mix there, what capabilities can you utilize with the APIs that are available to create integrations, to create a data warehouse, discuss RENXT Sky API as well. So including if you have Financial Edge, you can use a lot of the same capabilities, sync that data, create integrations as well. And we'll go through some of these sample, test case scenarios, really, where we'll create an LO test contact. We can create a test transaction, and we can actually see this data sync over in real time. We can create example queries inside the data warehouse environment. So if we're making these API calls and we're syncing the data down, we can make queries directly against the database here. Perhaps other people will come up with other questions, and we'll answer them as they go. We'll also show a simple Sky add-in we built, talk about what more you can do with Sky add-ins. They're really kind of a neat way to augment the Blackbaud RE NXT environment with data from different data sources or data from RE NXT that you're computing with or doing something with it offline and then bringing it back in to present it differently. As well as in any real-time LORE NXT specific integrations that we can do. And we set up an example for constituent coding. And then we'll have some more of that QA piece. I think we had a couple questions pop in the chat. So before I kick it over to you, Nate, where we'll start off at the top, CRM APIs. So yes, you can build integrations to BBCRM as well. You can sync data from BBCRM as well. So really anything that's in the Blackbaud world, and if you're looking at the open APIs that are available in the Sky environment, you can add those into the mix, and those are the types of services that we offer. Let's jump in, Nate.
All right, sounds great. So we're going to take a look at some of the Luminate Online REST, or sorry, SOAP options. So when you want to use web services to, say, sync down different entities, let's say you wanted to sync down constituents and donations, you have different operations that you can use from the documentation in order to access these different things. Some of the more common ones, if you just want to insert data, we have like the get incremental inserts or the query operation types. And so I'll kind of show you a little example in our code of how we do that. We can set up jobs in our code that run in the background of a server that set up a sync. And so you can run those every minute, you can run those daily, you can run those for custom intervals, but they'll every time they run, they will trigger a new sync of data from either Luminate Online or, we also have ones for Sky API that I'll get into here in a minute.
Yeah, and that's a specific place too, I think, Nate, just to call out there, what you're talking about is these jobs, right? The data is continuously changing. And if you want to sync the data to your offline environment, whether it's for a custom integration or if it's for a data warehouse project, which we're going to show you today, you may want to set up those sync intervals. So 5 minutes is common, 1 minute, right? But you want to stay close to real time, but also think about, your API calls, the volume of your data that you're getting. So, those will be adjusted for best performance practices as well. But we're going to sync this data down, and we are making calls to all of the endpoints that Nate's showing in the documentation on there. So this is all stuff that you can build. We've kind of assembled it together over many years, but these are all integrations that you can go out there and build today with the APIs.
Correct. Yeah, and we have a web services tool that speaks with web services. And it logs in and is able to, it's a client, it logs in and is able to then access it, access web services and get the data that way. It's also able to only get the data that's been updated or created recently. So let's say you've already synced all your data down. Each new sync will only check and get the latest data that you need. So it's a little bit of an overview. We have those syncs set up so that way you can sync a lot of different options, whether it's constituents or products or refunds, donations, and many, many others, really. We can sync all of them.
Yeah, and I think the main point too is to just show you that, hey, this is a real build out. It's not demoware. It's something that, we're able to spin up the way that we've assembled our warehouse. Typically a client will say, hey, we've got Luminate Online, let's just say, or they've got Razor's Edge NXT, or they've got whatever Blackbaud product, and we're looking at those two specifically today. But it's something we can spin up and have that data syncing same day, right? So when we kick off that integrations, a pre-built data warehouse, and we're continuously releasing updates to it. Blackbaud will add new endpoints, and we'll be rolling them in for sync. And kind of the differences that Nate was talking about there too is there's sync endpoints and then there's query endpoints. So sometimes we may also want to warehouse data that's not typically synced, but we may need to query it or make selects, and you can do that with web services, and then we can get those data sets back and insert them into the corresponding tables, and we'll show you that database structure as well.
We have a new question. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Simon, something like that.
Yes, Simon, I can take that question. Yeah, so if you do have a situation where your partition goes out of sync, obviously you can submit a support request and you can get that refreshed. That's one option. Another thing we've seen with some organizations and instances of implementation is using the default partition to sync data. A lot of the issues that you're talking about tend to arise when people have duplicate management enabled and you're not going through on a regular basis and managing that process. But there are a few ways to work around that. And also we can set up alerts in our warehouse. So if we're not seeing certain data points, we can bring that in. Another workaround to his point too is we've done side loading of transactions, and that's another way for us to programmatically check to make sure that we don't have records or transactions that are sitting in limbo while they're waiting for someone to manage the duplicates.
And we can resync the data too. So let's say some data was missed for whatever reason and then it didn't get added to the partition. We can do a full resync if we need to get all that data back so that none of it's lost, and then it can be re-added into the warehouse without any being lost.
Exactly. That's a regular request that I'll send Nate's way, right? Which is
correct.
Our client, had a bunch of data come in. Maybe they had to do some duplicate resolutions on it, and then when that data actually gets processed and updated, it might be past the updated at date, which is what the query uses in web services on the Luminate side of things to pull that data over into an offline environment when you make a select or a get request from web services. But we can go back and resync, and we've built resyncing methodologies into our warehouse utilizing these APIs.
Correct. We can use the query operation to get group IDs and group names. Typically what we do is just sync all the groups down or a certain number of groups down based on client needs. So, but yeah, we can do the query operation to get group IDs and group names if we need to. The integration does not cause issues with the normal working of actual products because it is hosted on a separate server, so the servers do not overlap. And so with the way that Luminate Online and even Razor's Edge is set up, our API requests do not cause any slowdown of the other Blackbaud services.
Yeah, and specifically to your point, the technology inside Luminate web services, specifically to Naveen's question, it will keep track of the requests by that user ID, so it knows the last time I did a get incremental inserts, for example, right? And it will reply with the data that I'm missing from that last insert. So even if you have another integration running, as long as you're using a different username and password combination, it's going to keep track of those and those sessions separately and distinctly.
Correct. And Surafel, we do have integrations with BBCRM set up where we can access data. If custom endpoints are set up in BBCRM, we are able to access those and sync the data into the middleware, or just send them, import them somewhere else, whatever's needed.
Yeah, a lot of times, Surafel, to your point here, a lot of times what we're doing for clients in the BBCRM environment using the same warehouse technology is there's some data that's in an object in BBCRM and they want it to be surfaced on the web. And so we can create web endpoints that provide client-side authentication to Luminate Online environments, and the data on the back end is accessed administratively via our middleware. Those are integrations that are commonly done for our BBCRM clients, sync them in our sandbox environments. We'll talk through a lot of the BBCRM stuff, but specifically for today, focus on RENXT and Luminate Online for the demonstration. But it's in the exact same way. The library makes a connection out, pulls the data in, and stores it in the database. So this applies to all the Blackbaud products with open APIs. All right. I'll let you show some of those syncs into the table structure as well.
Yeah, we can take a look at some of those low integrations.
So on the left-hand side of the screen, this is looking at a sandbox that we just spun up for today. So we're basically spinning up the collection of all the integrations we built and in our package that makes up the data warehouse product that has dependencies on the Blackbaud Open API, specifically the ones we just looked at, the LO web services, as well as the RENXT APIs. And on the left-hand side, one of the things that we've recently added, just in constant communication, taking input from our clients, is we started to prefix the table names with the data source so that it's easier for our clients who go in there, write their own queries, connect Power BI to this environment to do their own dashboarding or reporting, or even if we're doing it, for them to understand the data source of the table data that's stored in there. So you'll see LO underscore groups, right? And you'll know that, okay, the source of these groups is Luminate Online. Just a simple way to go through that. You were showing, Nate, the constituents on the Luminate Online sync before, and obviously if you do a select all, it'll pull down those constituent data from the database. And no matter what you use as a workbench, or ultimately what the actual database is that we want to connect to and configure with, typically our clients will be in the Azure environment, or they could be in the AWS environment. But on the left-hand side of the screen, most of these workbenches will allow you to also just look at the table structure. So if you go up, Nate, and look at LO constituents, you can kind of get an idea for, what are the columns in this table, right? And as you can see, if you're one of those Luminate Online clients in the audience today, you're starting to see a lot of field names that seem very familiar, right? If you're looking in Constituents 360, or you're looking in the additional information section, when you're doing a setup of the database configuration, Luminate Online, you're seeing all those field names. So what we're doing, and what the web services allows you to do on Luminate Online, is sync down the values for every row in the database that you want to allow to sync, and you can decide what fields you want to save, what additional information you want to sync. In this case of the data warehouse, on the downward path, we are storing this, and it's being used as a report writing facility. So most of the information that we would grant access to here would be read-only, but we've built many functions to go and update a record back in LO, or update a record in RENXT, and we'll show those examples as well as we go to Jeremy's question. The frequency, though, Naveen, to his follow-up question there, that is an important thing to keep in mind, and it just depends on the data volume. So we're often tweaking that, but pretty much everybody that's running our warehouse product is syncing everywhere between 1 minute and 5 minutes, depending on the integrations and number of connections that they have.
And Naveem, it doesn't affect the speed of Blackbaud to do so. All right, so just do a quick overview of the RE stuff. So with the RE sync, you can obviously use see in their documentation, you can sync down gifts or constituents or anything like that. And oh, it looks like it's refreshing on me. And we have a process set up for syncing that as well. So once again, you can schedule a job that syncs those different entities down, whether they are gifts or constituents or any of the other ones. And yeah, add those to the data warehouse just in the same way. So in our services, we have all these different syncs set up. These are most of our core ones, but we can even add others pretty easily. No big deal. And it'll bring in all the different fields, just depending on what they are, depending on the entity.
Yeah,
and kind of database. Sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, if you're showing on that code mode, you can kind of just show that mapping that you had in the IDE there on the development environment. Because I know we got some pretty technical people on the call here for DevCon. So just you can see the mapping that Nate has in the file, and where we're mapping it from the value we're getting in a JSON response, where is it going in the database, right? And programmatically, yeah, sure, we set this all up.
And I'll show you quickly the same in Luminate. For Luminate, we can do the formatting to make sure that we map from either from the original records field names into our own database field names. Obviously we keep them as similar as we can, but we can even bring in custom fields as well. So on a per client basis, we do have many cases where we bring in a lot of different constituent custom fields particularly. And then we can use our little API to update a constituent record afterwards using our constituent formatter, which will take those fields and format them back into the proper field names and formats.
And this was that specific, if we pause on this screen for a second, to Jeremy's question. So a lot of times, we'll have to map this back if we're going to make an update right into the Luminate
Right.
online record, because we do some sort of processing, whatever the client would like. Most of the clients in the data warehouse now are going to say, we have all of this data in here. We need to utilize some business logic. Maybe that's transforming data. Maybe it's aggregating it with other external data sources that they may have. We have clients that have learning management systems, and we'll bring that data into the data warehouse environment. Maybe we find something else about them, or they have a much more in-depth bio that they filled out as part of a learning management course, and then we can append those data points to their Luminate Online Constituent 360 record, which will generally flow into RENXT or BBCRM, depending on their CRM database or record. But we can go back and forth in either environment, reading and writing, and we're doing that on a regular basis.
Regarding exceptions and errors, that's a good question. Yeah, it depends on the exception to some degree. For the most part, on the syncs themselves, we will just log them into our server, so that way we can review them and address them if needed. We'll have a process in place to skip, certain exceptions, just so we don't interrupt the sync. And then once, if the sync is totally broken and continues to cause errors, then we'll throw a new exception. That way it'll be easy to spot and catch and fix. But we can set up a variety of processes. These are just the kind of the core ones. So we can really do anything with an exception that's needed. It just depends on the situation.
Yeah, and obviously, one of the benefits of building your own data warehouse is we have the ability to add in client logic on top of the base logic, right? So we can have different routes that are taken depending on what the client's exception logic is and what the exception record is. But in terms of consistency, we're generally getting the data, we're able to insert it or merge it or upsert it into the database depending on the application. And it's a very reliable process. We have a lot of clients running these today, and bringing in thousands and thousands of new records for our big clients every hour. And we do see very few exceptions. It's a very reliable sync methodology here, and the APIs on the Blackbaud side are very reliable as well. Specifically, if we go back and we look at the database a little bit, I think we'll just finish walking through those tables, and then we'll get to some more questions. I do like to keep it interactive as we go, but we do have some examples we'll show. But obviously, when you're talking to a tech crowd, we want to be cognizant as to the tech questions as we can. And you'll see that the RE tables as well are prefixed with RE, and if there's other data sources, we just follow a similar pattern depending on how many different data sources the client wants to sync into the warehouse. And this is really key, is we'll put all the Blackbaud products into the warehouse for them, and then, like I said about the learning management, they'll have other platforms from other vendors in the technology space, and they can just continuously add to their warehouse what data points they want to sync. The main point being there is then they have an environment where not only they can have custom business logic to update, read, or write to any of their systems, depending on what it may be, but then they can also create reports, run queries, and join data across those data sources inside of one database, right? So one of the examples that Nate can show too is we can join a constituent, donation from Luminate Online, and we can join that to the contact record, but the source of that table data can be from RENXT, right? So, and that's just because we have the data in both environments, right? So here's an example where we are selecting from Razor's Edge constituents. We're doing an inner join on the Luminate Online constituent, where we're joining on the ID from Razor's Edge being the member ID of the Luminate Online record, which is how most of the folks on the call, if they do have LO and RENXT, that's how you would have that data point set up. And then we can left join in Luminate Online donations. And this allows you, so if you're running a sync, and this applies as well for the BBCRM customers on the call, if you're running a sync between the systems, there may not be always that you're bringing every data point over. So in the warehouse, you can have all the data points, all the custom data elements collected on a transaction in Luminate Online. You can have all of those attributes, right? Smart field data, custom values, custom objects from BBCRM, or donation custom fields from RENXT, right? And maybe not all those data points exist in Luminate Online. So now we put them all into one spot, and we can do a join. And sometimes the purpose of these joins is not only just for reporting and dashboarding, and that's very nice to use our data warehouse for, but a lot of clients will also have us stand up, external endpoints so that, we can, add that data to a personalized experience, either in a donor portal, on a web page.
Tana, for a quick hit, as far as deduping records, that would be handled on the RE and low side of things, and we would sync and merge the records themselves based on what were passed from RE and low.
Oh, there we go.
All
right, I think I'm back.
Go into some examples.
My headset, yeah, we can show some examples, Nate. Thank you.
All right. So, let's see, which example do we want to start with? We'll start with, we can just create a test contact record and a test transaction and see how they do. Back to Google Chrome. See my screen recording settings. There we go. Yeah, Google Chrome.
While you bring up that example, I'll talk to Jeremy. Had a question there. Does the warehouse end up becoming folks' source of truth? So no, I mean your database is individually. So your Luminate Online, your Razor's Edge, your BBCRM, whatever your CRM database of record may still be your source of truth. And one example to that point is that one of the functions we have in the warehouse is, always do a resync. So always resync from the sources if we need to, for whatever reason, if we feel like any data is not 100% there. So we're always pulling down back from the sources, and we can go all the way back to the beginning of time when we want to do that resync. So we have a resync process that can kick off and bring all that data back down. But what the warehouse can be is a way for you to, extend and create new functionality that you want, where you have commingled products, both, specific Blackbaud products as well as external products. I kept using the learning management system, but we have clients, that have different platforms that do different things. Some of them have some patient information data systems that are like HIPAA, but they're like some sort of outreach, information about certain types of procedures, etc. And they may want to see like who's engaging with that, and be able to develop some sort of engagement factor driven marketing based on the way people are interacting with kiosks in their museums, in their aquariums, in their zoos. So we have a lot of orgs that still have a lot of foot traffic, and so they'll have different systems running in there. They'll sometimes have point of sale systems as well, and they can bring that data in and really look at, a full picture and be able to push that data back in after they put some business logic, push it back into their CRM, push it back into their online marketing tool by grouping people, etc. So I think, Nate, it looked like you were making a transaction there in real time. Is that right?
That's right. I created a new constituent and I created a transaction. See if the constituent has synced yet. Take a minute.
Great. So, one of the things that we're just trying to show here is, one, that it's set up, it works, it's near real time. Like I said, we'll have this sync running in this sandbox environment, generally on a minute basis, and it'll bring over that new record, and you can look at the timestamps to see them come in. So we stood up all this infrastructure, so this way it's demoable, and you can kind of, as a tech people, understand the behind the scenes. And on a more business use case, you think about what is it that you want to accomplish, and then you can really use this technology to support that.
Yeah, and so here's the new constituent that just synced down. Also the constituent that just created a donation. Something got updated on their record as well related to that interaction, so it also got resynced again. So So we have them both there. And then we should probably have that gift as well by now.
And obviously you use all your standard SQL, right? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm Lizzie. I'm wrapping because Heather was covering for me at the beginning. We are at time. I don't think anybody is coming immediately into this room. So if you guys have time for one or two more questions,
Sure.
please to go ahead and post them in the chat. While we are waiting on that, I've just got a couple of procedural things. So I'm going to talk, but keep posting questions, please. Thank you so much to everyone for the time today. I am going to post the link to the session survey in the chat. If you would please take a minute to fill that out along for all the other sessions that you see and enjoy. Of course, we want your feedback on the content that we're presenting, but also our top rated sessions are going to get a golden ticket to BBCon. So if you could help us figure out who's going to meet us in Denver, that would be great. Quick note on BBCon, we will have our first in-person option since 2019, which is really exciting. So we will be in Denver, October 22nd to 24th. If you can make it out in person, we would love to see you there. Otherwise, we will also have virtual options. And I think that's all I've got. So it looks like we did get another question. So I'm going to go back to muting myself, and thanks everybody for the time.
Thank you. Yeah, and so Simon, regarding your question, the pros of using the web service get incremental functions are that they are consistently set up to really effectively get like that next, when you run a sync, they get that next record that was changed really well. They give you the incremental updates, they get you the incremental deletes every time. Really, I think it's a well supported route as well. For the query selected, it just depends on the record really. It's a little, I think the query is a little bit harder to maintain as far as making sure you only get like newly updated records or newly created records. Still very effective, but sometimes you're dealing with types of records that don't have like a modified date on them, and so then it can get a little more complex. So I think the get incremental functions are a little bit simpler and more effective as far as what Blackbot has set up.
Yeah, and we'll utilize the incremental verse query wherever incremental is available, right? And it just creates a reliable sync, and it keeps track of that, last time you requested it. So it's keeping track of the date stamps for you, which is a nice, reliable thing. And then I know too, Lizzie, I want to be cognizant of when we're going to get evicted. So, I think really the last thing that we're going to show, and we'll have a follow-on webinar as well for DevCon with Blackball that we're doing, so we'll get into this in a lot more detail, where it's just that if folks are interested, they'll get an email with an invite in the future. But the other thing is, you can obviously create all these data points, calculate all this data, and create Sky add-ins with it, or use it to populate custom objects in BBCRM. So you can store this data after it gets processed with your own rules, and then store it as part of the records in the Blackbolt CRMs, both Razor's Edge and BBCRM.
You can also set up a listener that will listen for particular things, like a donation over, say, $500, and it can make a change then in Blackbot in Razor's Edge to add a constituent code, say, to the constituent record associated with that Luminate online donation. Sure. So I'll show you, while that's syncing down, I'll show you quickly the Sky add-in. So I built this little custom Sky add-in just for our sake today, where it shows the Luminate online interest groups related to my constituent record, and then also the Luminate online email details related to this constituent record, as long as they're in sync between Luminate Online and Razor's Edge.
Yeah, and I think, Nate, too, specifically for this one, I mean, obviously we can pull this data from the warehouse, but we can also build these Sky add-ins utilizing the platform that we have with the warehouse to actually make REST-based API calls to Luminate Online to get this data in real time. And a lot of the specific data that you wouldn't generally sync over, but you want to make sure it's up to date. And in this case, Luminate Online is the database of record for what interest groups are they opted into, and what's the current status of their accepts email equals true. So if we went and we opted out of DNL news, this is a sandbox environment, obviously, and we refresh this page, we'd get that immediately.
Correct. Let me see.
Yeah, so Simon,
Oh, yeah,
for your case too, we can sync that email data down and put it into the warehouse, regardless of whether the contact record is updated, because the email actions can be synced separately. And that's another example of where, you know, we can do a variety of approaches to grab that data, right? If it's creating email interaction data, we can pull that down. That's usually available on a monthly basis, and we can pull that data down, store it, and cache it permanently, and then make it accessible over all of the months, right, with query tools in your standard SQL.
All right, so in this example, I gave a gift of $576, and the code on the back end was, I had this listener set up that listened for a donation, a single donation over 500, or a monthly donation over basically $42. And then based on that, it would create an update in Razor's Edge. And so there it is. Added a constituent code, and we can obviously do different use cases for this, but that's one. And then I added newsletter opt-out. So that shows up here.
Yeah, and I think really the main thing to focus on for the business logic, where we're talking about creating listeners in the warehouse, we can create these listeners. Some people like to think of them mentally like triggers or something, but a listener is kind of just querying for these examples. And we can figure out that, hey, anytime a transaction happens over $500, over $1,000, do something. Now, we just added that constituent code in the top right of this RENXT page, but you may want to kick off a process inside BBCRM, inside RENXT, add a data point somewhere in real time, or do an integration somewhere else, or send an email, right? So it can just be the start of any business process that you normally handle on a manual basis or an after the fact reporting basis. You can kick it off in real time. So some people will want you to update their portfolio, notify a gift officer, right? You can think of just all the examples that our clients have brought to us over the years, and this way they can start working on whatever they want to work on as soon as possible. And they don't have to wait for, batch processing to complete, and they have all their, very specific data entry rules. So they have very defined batches, and this allows you to get the data out there ahead of time and being worked with it.
There was a question earlier about showing the HTTP client. Here's the web services client for Luminate Online, and it uses a PHP SOAP client to make this make all the HTTP calls to the web services specifically. So whether that's a upsert, and get incremental inserts, or a query, or a find, or anything like that.
That's right. Yeah, and I think it's great. We have a nice live interactive session, and we'll definitely do more of this, and we'll reach out with Blackbaud on our next session. It'll be more in depth, but hopefully we gave you a good sampling today of everything that's possible. You can really build out your own data warehouse, build out your own custom logic, make your own calls. The APIs are very robust that Blackbaud offers, so you can do a lot with that. And Brenda, we'll get to you for the last question. How do you handle any changes made to the online gift after the fact that's due to the donor mistake? So I'm assuming then, Brenda, maybe you're talking about a Luminate online gift. Okay, thanks for the real time, yes. So in a Luminate online environment, so a lot of times what we'll do is, if you need to update the gift, if you're using Razor's Edge NXT or BBCRM, obviously that gift and that contribution record can be updated. If you want the record to actually be updated in Luminate Online, as you know, transactions are generally immutable, but we've worked with Blackbaud's great DI team, and we can actually create a file that we drop off and a stored procedure to, modify any corrections. So a lot of times organizations may want campaign fund appeal or source code or something like that updated on the transaction. And that is possible. We can create an automated workflow for that from the warehouse. A lot of times we'll generate those files based on how that transaction was corrected in the CRM of record, whether that's BBCRM or RENXT. We'll get the updated transaction details. And again, we can join in the warehouse the LO transaction and the BBCRM or the RENXT transaction as a table. And we can look at what's different about where it originated in Luminate versus how it's coded in RENXT or BBCRM, make those updates, and then get them processed over to LO, so it'll update whatever kind of coding. And then this way, the user interface is just update the record in your CRM, fix it however you want, and it can flow over to the online world if you need it to be updated for certain marketing activities that you're doing over there, or being able to display it back in a donor portal. Sure, no problem. I think that's it, Lizzie, and thank you very much for hosting us today, and thank you for Heather for jumping in from the beginning.